Woman, you are the holy grail, the Magdalene. Woman, no need to search any longer. The priestess.
Welcome to the Woman Rising podcast, hosted by Kathy Hartenstein and Zephy Devi, where we elevate and celebrate inspiring women on the rise. In this podcast, we talk to women from all walks of life about their soul's journey, the obstacles they overcame, and how they embody their feminine power. We hope to elevate women's place in the world, showcase their contributions, and provide inspiration for all women to rise to their fullest potential. Today, our guest is Danette Wolpert Holman, who is a visionary, entrepreneur, and thought leader in the field of transformational media. She is currently the founder and president of the Illuminate Film Festival, the world's premier festival for evolutionary cinema. Her focus is on elevating consciousness and catalyzing personal, community, and planetary change. Prior to founding Illuminate in 2014, Danette spent 5 years as associate director of the Miami International Film Festival and held positions as director of the Washington, D.C.-based Screening Room and manager of the Washington Jewish Film Festival. Before festival life, Danette was a senior management consultant for Ernst & Young, where she provided financial management and technology solutions for Fortune 500 clients. Having studied both business and engineering, she holds degrees in management and information systems. Danette is the recipient of the National Association for Women Business Owners Visionary Award for Entrepreneurial Excellence. Welcome, Danette. It is our true pleasure to have you here today. We are excited to hear about all of the interesting work you do and the many ways you have brought people together and empowered and uplifted women.
Thank you, Kathy. It's such a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. Thank you. We know each other from many, many years from Sedona. And I'm so glad that we have you on our podcast. And we've been wanting to do this for a long time. We finally got you. And that's exciting to me. But,
Perfect timing, actually. It's perfect timing.
Exactly. Always is the perfect timing when we finally get together because, we all go through trials, tribulations, good things, happy things, not so good things. But this is the right time for us to be together. So I wanted to ask you, I know you knew about Women Arising even from Sedona because we had talked about it. And, you were one of the beginning women that knew a lot about it. But when you first heard that phrase, what did it make you feel? What kind of emotions, what kind of things that it went through your mind? Because it's many years ago, but now you're hearing it again, after all these years and you're here with us. So I don't know. What do you think? What do you feel?
I feel hope because we have all essentially grown up in a man's world with increasing respect for the divine feminine, I think, and with a generation, right, like ours, that felt as we were growing up, we could be who we wanted to be. And we had all the opportunities, I think, that men had, but we still felt like we had to prove ourselves. And I went into engineering, I think, as a teenager, partly because I wanted to prove that I could do anything, that I could do what the guys could do. And I was good at math. And I was a strong student. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to apply to engineering school with like the 10 other girls, that are applying. So Women Arising is, I think it's a very long and important trajectory. And sure, sometimes we have to take, 2 steps back to take 3 steps forward, but we never take our eye off the prize.
Yeah, that's amazing because we started this project like 2007 with another dear friend of ours that and then we continue taking it on. So it is a long time process because I feel the women never, okay, how do I say? It's nothing for us to stop. We'll continue rising and we'll continue going forward and we continue lifting ourselves from that place that we were. And I feel so lucky that I'm still here this time, you know, and I'm sure you do too, that we really rise in this way, because I think it's so important. It's a different rising from the 60s, correct? Is it different rising from the 80s, and is it different rising now? So I think we are in a very great place. And yeah, I think it's amazing. And thank you for being here with us. Thank you so much.
I love that idea of hope, right? Because I think a lot of times we forget that component of this, and that hope is a really big part of how we rise and how we take our place in a lot of ways. And I think that idea of that long trajectory is very true. And yet, the beauty of now and the women that are showing up in these ways is very powerful. So I really love that answer. It's a really great answer.
I actually have a really, I think, poignant addition to that, which is, by hope, I mean that leadership on all levels will, through women arising, land in a more balanced place that's going to create a more balanced world. And I can refer to our opening night film at Illuminate Film Festival this year, which was The Wisdom of Happiness. It is the Dalai Lama's final film, right? He's in his 90s, and it was sort of his potentially final message. And we had a theater full with nearly 800 people. And there is a quote in this film where the Dalai Lama says that it's very possible, and he thinks that the next Dalai Lama may be a woman.
Wow.
And in that moment, the entire theater erupted and clapped and cheered, because I think we all know, men and women alike, that there is a divine feminine masculine imbalance in the world still, and that there is a love and a nurturing and an equal kind of respect for all, for every human, that is really, really rooted in that divine feminine. And that there is a call now for that to become a larger part of our leadership today. And I don't necessarily mean that it has to be a woman per se, but it does require more feminine energy. Because I think, men and women have both. We have masculine and feminine energy, and balance is really the key. And I think we are slowly recognizing that, and that's what I mean by hope.
I love that. And I love that sense of balance too, between that masculine and that feminine, and the image of that theater erupting with that message from the Dalai Lama. I can feel it just in you describing it, and that is the trajectory, the future of where we're heading, and that's a great definition of that hope, finding that true balance between those two things, and that women can really be part of that in new and interesting ways. I've had the great pleasure of knowing you and working with you at the Illuminate Film Festival back several years ago, and getting to see how you are such a visionary and how you really are able to take ideas and turn them into action and make really beautiful things as a result of that. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today. And I love kind of the dichotomy of some of the things that you worked on, like being in engineering and management and money, and then moving into not just the arts and creativity, but also spirituality and how you brought all that together. And I think it's a great reflection of that masculine and feminine energy coming together in some ways. So I'd love to hear your story.
Sure. Well, if you had asked me as a, you know, high school senior or a college student what I'd be doing in the future, I would have told you that I'd today probably be a partner at, an IT and management consulting firm, and I would have kind of been the first female partner, and I would have tried to beat all the records and um kind of make my way up the ladder. And that was young me. And I grew up along the way into my true self. And that required many skips and hops and leaps towards my true purpose. And I think in looking back, the most important thing that I did was listen, because I was certainly that kid who wanted to achieve. I was completely, type A achiever, went out for all the leadership positions and the clubs and the everything, and thinking that was the right way to evolve and to progress in life. And then one day I was sitting at my desk at Ernst & Young, which, by the way, was a fantastic company to work for and really kept my brain engaged. And I did love the work, but there was something kind of quietly chirping at me that was, well, when you're 80 years old and you look back on your life and you look at what you did, what did you use your life for? Are you going to be happy saying, okay, well, yeah, you helped a whole bunch of Fortune 500 companies, become more efficient, and, you helped their bottom line, and maybe, you created some innovation along the way. And I'm not saying that, that's not a very, very valid, lifetime of work, but it wasn't in my heart. It wasn't part of my soul's calling. And I had to do something about it. So I did take a leap. In fact, I took two leaps. My first leap was leaving Ernst & Young without a real idea of what I wanted to do. But I gave myself a year to dabble in all the things that felt soulful to me, with the goal of choosing a new career at the end of that year. And at the end of that year, I chose film. And that was because I felt like film and media had this great potential to move people. It had a great potential to change your perspective, to educate, entertain, inspire, to deepen, to transform. And I still to this day think that it is the most powerful medium that we as humans have at our disposal to do those things, because you could create an experience that you can see, hear, and feel, even though you're not there or actually experiencing things yourself. And you can experience it through another character or through the subject of a documentary. And it becomes really just a part of your mental, emotional, and spiritual bank. And you can live from there. So I took a leap from Ernst & Young. I went into film. I was in production for a few years. I dabbled around in production companies. And then I decided to try film festivals, because film festivals are at that intersection between the content, the film, and its audience. And that to me was that special place because I could see the impact. I could see exactly what that content was doing for people. They were laughing, they were crying, they were lighting up, they were having an aha moment. Um, and that was the reward. And that was also what I thought could guide creators or curators um, into a better world. Because if we could really create and curate the content that was not only uplifting people, but showing them who they really are, showing them what their potential truly is, then we would end up making a very positive impact on the world and creating a humanity together that is loving, that is equal, that is balanced, that is enlightened, and that is serving everyone.
I love that description. I was in the arts for many years, in theater, and I love how that festival, which I've never really thought it through like that before, but how it's that intersection between the art and the spectator and how they can be transformed and the impact of the work that we do and having that impact. And I think that is a very meaningful way to describe that. And I love that journey of how you discovered that in yourself and why that mattered to you. What were some of the main obstacles that you had to overcome to kind of do some of this? And I know you decided to start your own festival, so I imagine that was a big undertaking as well. But just even in life, to be able to, trust yourself enough to make some of those changes, because that in and of itself is a triumph.
Yeah, well, certainly, obstacle number one was society because, I had a very lucrative position and I was already making my way up the ladder, in the corporate consulting world. And just taking that leap and going, okay, I'm going to go into film. And you know what? I'm going to go to the bottom of the ladder again. Because, lateral moves in the film industry are not very common. It was like you got to put in your dues. So I had to go from senior consultant down to intern
Wow.
and start over. And so that was a huge obstacle because, well, it was in a way um stepping down or stepping back. And most people would think, well, you're crazy. You've worked this hard for this long to do that. But I knew this. I knew that if I didn't do it early on, that it would even get harder later, right? Because then I would have this gorgeous house and I would, have this amazing car and be taking European vacations and then I would have to step away from that. And I thought, well, let me do this now while I'm young and I can build from a more authentic place. And so that was obstacle number one. Obstacle number two was actually trying to figure out what my purpose really truly was. I then spent several years at film festivals and worked my way towards a very exciting position at the Miami Film Festival. So I was associate director there. I was there for 5 years. It was, a fabulous position to be in. I learned a lot at Miami. It was sort of film festival boot camp for me. I learned, how to run all these various departments. But I I still knew there was something not quite right. And I was halfway there to my purpose, but I wasn't completely there. And I had to really go into deep inquiry as to what is missing. And I think that's the obstacle for most people because when you ask them, well, what is your dream? What are you supposed to be doing in this world? Most of the time, our answer is, I don't know yet. And so, uncertainty was a big obstacle. But I can tell you that I knew something was missing. And then I just became observant And what I found in those last couple years at Miami Film Festival was a different way of life. And not for me, but I had a dear friend who was on the festival staff with me who lived her life in a very different way. And I was fascinated by it. And she seemed to just know everything. She seemed to know what might happen next. She seemed to know what was really happening with this fellow staff member who was, having a really rough time, or who was, I remember she said, "Oh, she's trying to outrun her dragons." And I was like, "What do you mean by that?" And looking back, of course, she was completely right, and she really truly understood people at the deepest level, and she would intuit. Now, I didn't use the word intuition at the time, but now I see what was so different about the way she lived her life is she had intuition, baby. One time, and I've told this story a couple times, but I'll tell it again because it's telling. She came to me. We were in the middle of the Miami Film Festival, right? This huge 10-day film festival. We had this mega venue, right? Big, huge, historic theater where we had all of our biggest world premieres. And, we had a big star that night. I can't remember. I think it might have been Danny Glover. She told me while we were still in the office during the day, she said, "Do you have a T-shirt and a flashlight?" It was either flashlight or batteries. And I said, "No, why would I have that?" And she said, "Well, I just need it." And I said, "Well, why do you need it?" And she said, "I don't know. I just know that I need it." And I thought that's just bizarre. And of course, the next day, I had asked her, "Okay, so last night at the premiere, what happened with the T-shirt and the flashlight?" And she said, "Well, there was a volunteer, that was walking down the lobby hallway at the theater where there's these huge like sconces on the wall, and they were sharp at the bottom, and he tears his shirt." And of course, it's a very elegant venue, and nobody wanted him to be, walking around with this huge torn shirt. And so, of course, she had an extra shirt. She had found what she needed because she always listened. And then, of course, and I said, "And the flashlight?" "Well, the volunteer was trying to show Danny Glover to his seat, which was at the front, of this huge venue, and he was late. And so they had to usher him with the flashlight, and the batteries were dead." And so I said, "Of course, of course." I'm like, "How are you never wrong?" And, that's a sort of far out use of intuition, right? But what I really saw from her was being guided, allowing herself to be guided by the small voice in her head. When it was things, when it was deeply important things, like what should I do with my life? Or, do I need to be there for my family right now? So I saw that, and I was basically like, well, how do I get a little bit of what you got? And I said, "Can you teach me how to find it?" And she actually just said no. She said, "No, you have to go find it yourself." And so actually, after 5 years at Illuminate, I chose to take my second leap, which was I've got to go find the special sauce. I've got to go find that missing piece from my life that's going to lead me deeply into a way of life that I know is meant for me. And it's going to steer me towards my purpose and what I'm meant to do on the planet. So I did. I took my Eat, Pray, Love. It was a whole year of traveling around the world. I went to South America, all through South America. I went to South Africa. I went on a journey across the United States in a car with a friend. And I actually call it my Seek, Pray, Love, because I was starting to discover a more spiritual way of life. I was starting to discover that intuition was the same thing as sort of connection to source, spirit, that universal energy, whatever you want to call it. For some people, it might be, God or Buddha or Allah or, whatever. And that there is a connection to all there is. I tend to call it the universe, because I'm looking at it from both a science and spiritual perspective. And I actually believe that they meet in the middle. And that there is a connection to that energy that will guide us. And that's what I call intuition. And that is what I was out there to find, was that connection. And I did through that year of travel, which led me to, ta-da, Sedona. And then I met very, very special people, including you two, who are on similar journeys and also looking for their purpose and very much open to the idea that they could be led to it.
No. I love how that journey is like an unraveling in a lot of ways, where there's different layers of the discovery for you. Um and the thing that see as a theme is your courage to listen. And it's interesting that you say, "Oh, I want to learn more about my intuition," but somehow you also were listening to it the entire time, because it was sort of propelling you forward in these directions. And also how, sometimes we think we land on a purpose, right? But really that purpose is an unfolding. It's something that evolves with us. And as we kind of go deeper into it, it also becomes something else, So I think that is a great description of that.
Yeah, it's a discovery that it's actually all there, and it has been there. And it's just about going deep within instead of going out there and finding it out there. I'm definitely a huge advocate of the unfolding, like you say. And I think that as we grew up, we put on this coat and then that coat and then that coat. And it's a lot of protection and it's a lot of what feels like safety. But I think in the end, our process is then to shed that coat and then shed that coat and then shed that baggage and shed that, weight, to truly find what was in us all along.
I love that thought. I think that's really great visual too. Um, and I'm curious, like as a woman, we're talking about women arising. You've been in kind of some different and interesting fields, and kind of also carving your own space in this world. As a woman, did you, come up against that patriarchy, against that sexism? Obviously, you went into engineering when you were young, but then you kind of opened up a whole world that's deep into the feminine energy. And it sounds like you had a lot of fearlessness along the way. And so I'm just curious, like either where you've seen it in the world or any times that you've experienced that.
I've experienced it more like on the collective level than I have very personally in my life. I was one of few women engineering students. That's for certain. And I actually never felt like the professors or the companies that were interviewing for jobs ever scrutinized women more than men. I felt like even in my corporate career, I got promoted along with the guys. So I was lucky, and I felt like, my generation was making huge progress. But I also have felt over time, again, that it's not just about male and female. It's actually about the divine feminine and divine masculine energies, and which energies dominate and which energies are more respected. And as a leader, what energies are expected of you And so when I sort of took this last leap and founded the Illuminate Film Festival, I founded it, I think, in the divine flow. And now that I, reflect, I can see that I founded it after a full year of basically inner practice. It was right after my Seek, Pray, Love. I was so in the zone and in the flow, probably more so than any other time in my life. And that is the foundation upon which I founded Illuminate. So there was a natural balance. There was a natural, I think, feminine masculine balance where it was like I needed the masculine to assert, to to gather, to train everybody, but I was also completely coming from that divine authentic place that wanted to make a difference in the world and that wanted to nourish and inspire and enlighten. And so it was like this real magical balance. And that is, I think, why in our very first year, we had a magnificent kind of launch festival. I mean, look, we didn't have money, folks. This was so grassroots. And honestly, we didn't know if this was going to flop, or fly. This idea of a conscious film festival, right, that had a philosophy of spirituality and of like the fact that who we are, right, is that we are this interconnected, species, and we're interconnected with everything there is, with all other humans and plants and animals and the stars and the sun, and that one thing affects every other thing. That's the true nature of reality. That was kind of the basis upon which this was all founded. And that if we truly become, right, who we are, then we're going to create this magnificent world that we know is possible. But that sort of spiritual philosophy was not embraced in the film industry, and it was considered very woo-woo. So the idea of even starting a festival like this was a huge risk. And I needed that masculine energy to kind of make it happen. And yet that nourishing, uplifting, loving, we are love. That's the truth of who we really are. That was the feminine energy that was also guiding us. So in that first year, I think we had a $1,000 marketing budget in our first year. And we thought, hey, if we just put 500 butts in seats for the first year, this will have succeeded. And if we, attract an audience, even just 5 people from across Arizona state lines, right? That's a success. And if we get a world premiere by year 3, because thousands of film festivals out there all compete for a world premiere, right? The first time an audience gets to see a film. And I thought, okay, by year 3, if we get a world premiere, we're really on track. Well, in year 1, it was not 500 butts in seats, but 2,700. And we didn't just, attract 5 people from across state lines. We attracted an audience from something like 25 states and 11 countries. And we didn't just achieve, a world premiere in year 3. We had 4 world premieres in year 1, including a film called Death Makes Life Possible that was executive produced by Dr. Marilyn Schlitz and Dr. Deepak Chopra. And they both came with their film, of course. And, that really, really put us on the map, and it created a huge trajectory and momentum. So, I always felt like, well, when things like that happen, it's because the universe was behind us and we were tapped in. And so that was sort of like the realization, from year 1, is that if we are tuned in, right, then, Illuminate will expand and it will touch lives, and it will, create a new possibility for a new niche in the film industry. And it will bring people together. It will bring people closer to themselves. So to get back to your question, where did I sense kind of a resistance, right, with the masculine and feminine? I felt it within me as that journey continued. And I had to sort of kind of balance that feminine part of me that was allowing and that masculine part of me that was pushing. And boy, was that a huge lesson for me, because it led me to a very, very, very difficult place. I got advice from a business advisor that said, okay, and your first year was a huge success. Now, your second year is now going to be really important. Do you make, small steps to expand, or do you take a giant leap? And so everybody knows, like, this is going to be global, right? This is a movement. This is not just a film festival that's, and that was obviously a very, very masculine advisor. And, but also extremely successful in business. So, I thought, well, I need to take his advice. So I really started pushing. I really started embracing that masculine side of, like, let's do more, still with the idea that we were going to elevate consciousness and inspire transformation, personally, socially, on a planetary level. But it was a push. And so essentially 5 or 6 years in, I got very, very sick. And it was a very, very, very tough time in my life. And it's still very emotional for me, because here was my dream manifesting. Illuminate just grew and grew, and the stories that came back on how people's lives were changed, and how they sat through a film, and then during the post program, they felt like they could stand up and share an experience about being a woman that they'd never shared with anybody, including, like, their own family, and that they felt free finally for the first time in their lives. Like, things like that were happening during Illuminate. And I felt very on track, in the sense that we were making a difference, but I was sick. And in 2018, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And of course, my first question for the doctors is like, well, what's the cause? And they said there's no proven cause, that, this is random. And, I went to ask myself, my intuition, what's the cause of this tumor? And I worked with a practitioner to go kind of deep within, because I do think we do know the answers, and we have to trust ourselves with those answers. And through working with that practitioner, I learned my answer. And my answer was, I think this tumor has come to deliver a message, and to help me learn a lesson, and help me pivot something in my life that really needs to pivot. And it was a message of surrender. I was always, like I said, this type A who tended to do everything possible to control an outcome and create an outcome that I wanted, right? So having this beautiful, successful festival, even positive outcomes, right? Like changing people's lives. If we'll do anything and everything to create an outcome, we are not in the flow. We are not actually listening. We're pushing up against whatever is potentially meant to be. And if you do that for too long, you exhaust yourself. And I think that being diagnosed with the brain tumor was the universe's way of telling me something you're doing isn't working. You've got to learn how to elevate yourself into more flow and not just kind of keep that heavy coat on your back and walk uphill. And I was pretty stubborn, I was pretty stubborn. I think my value that I had assigned to myself in childhood was all about my achievements. And of course, I got a lot of positive encouragement from all my achievements from when I was a kid. And so I think that defined me, or that just became such a big part of who I am, that if I didn't control everything to success and positive outcome, that I wasn't going to know who I was. And so even though it was such a beautiful thing that was happening, the festival was such a beautiful thing, the way that I was holding it was not healthy. And so I decided to just shift. I decided to move back into a place of flow, which was, hey, if the festival happened this way, great. And if the festival happened that way, great. And if the festival maybe didn't even happen at all, great. Because if I was in the flow of the universe, like whatever is truly healthy will occur, and I will be in acceptance. That doesn't mean that you don't put intention, right? And that you don't work hard. All of those things, great. But you don't get so attached to the outcome that you will make yourself sick making that outcome happen. And so in the end, I am so grateful for that tumor, because that tumor taught me a lesson that I otherwise would have never learned because I was too dang stubborn. And the universe had to go so big, right? Can you get bigger than a brain tumor, to teach you a lesson? But I think that's honestly what I needed. And I was open to it, and I was determined to figure out what I needed to shift in order for this tumor to go away. And I know that sounds all woo, but I had watched years of documentaries, conscious documentaries, that showed me the power of the mind-body connection, right? I read Joe Dispenza's You Are the Placebo. I did all kinds of work, energy work, and have now truly understood the power of that and the legitimacy of that. I understood the power of all kinds of various alternative ways of healing that I never would have discovered had I just stuck solely to conventional medicine. I believe in both. I believe in the integration of conventional and alternative, treatments. And through all of that, I had the blessing and miracle of healing from that brain tumor. And there's a completely miraculous story there that would take quite a long time to tell. But the actual surgery was inconclusive. And so they did not consider that surgery a success. But I actually had a moment the night of the surgery where everything went from going in the absolute wrong direction to completely turning around and going in the right direction towards healing. And that moment where everything turned around was a 4-hour meditation that led me to my deepest moment of surrender. It was not just a letting go of the film festival or of any career goals. No, it was a surrender to my attachment to being on the earth still. It was like a surrender of every kind. It was a surrender. It was a letting go of being alive. It was a surrender of accomplishing any of my dreams. It was a surrender of being able to walk up the stairs. It was, it was a surrender of the deepest level. And it was like, okay, I'm going to be in full acceptance of whatever is. And if this surgery was not a success, because, I saw the labs and it was absolutely not good, right? And the surgeon had come in and he had told me that we'd have to wait, till tomorrow, but basically there's a possibility that they took out the wrong tumor. And I thought, wrong tumor? There's another tumor? And he said, well, there's a possibility that there is another tumor that's, so small that it wasn't picked up in any of the MRIs, and that was the tumor that was causing all the problem. And then we took out the wrong one. And I thought, why on earth would he be telling me this now? And I was like, he must have gone to pathology and they must have basically taken out the tumor and realized there was all the bad stuff wasn't in it. It's still in there, And so that's what led to this 4-hour meditation, because I was in absolute tears realizing that, this disease was going to probably end my life, in due time. And it was not going to be pretty, because this particular disease kind of destroys every part of your body very slowly. And I came to acceptance of what that meant, and that maybe that was what was meant for me. And maybe that my purpose was going to shift to now help other people who also received this extremely rare diagnosis, and not live whatever years you have left in complete fear, but live it because this is what is meant for you, and you're going to live in your highest self all the way out.
That is such a beautiful story, and I love that concept of that deep, deep surrender. It's extremely powerful. And I thank you so much for sharing it, because I think it's really inspirational for so many of us when we face those kinds of things.
I love that you are in this flow and you've been in that flow since that happened. But sometimes, we have to learn through those experiences, because we call them upon ourselves, because we need to wake up and we need to surrender and we need to say, it doesn't really matter. I just want to be the best I can be at this moment. And I find it so amazing that I know you from, the Danette before, in the middle, and after right now. And I'm getting chills as I'm speaking to you, because I realize there's a true healing happen, not just in the tumor, but every single cell of yours. And that's, to me, that's the powerful women. That is the divine feminine, to be able to surrender and to find herself through all this, and realizing, okay, yes, I can be a doer. Yes, I can be going, and being a businesswoman. But at the same time, I need to find out, who am I, and to take care of myself. So I don't even need to ask the question, because I know exactly when that divine feminine came in. But do you have words for that? I mean, I felt it as you were speaking through your experience, but do you have a moment specific? Maybe it was the meditation, maybe it was a different time that this divine feminine said, Danette, go with the flow. Just go with the flow.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that throughout my work, it was a year that I did this work with an intuitive, a medical medium. It was really the feminine that I was continuing to sort of re-recognize through that. And of course, it hit that sort of ultimate allowing during that meditation, where I truly, really understood the magnificence of that allowing, which is such a feminine quality, right? It's not the pushing, it's the allowing. And ever since then, I've been so aware of, these two forces. And when, you know, sometimes you need one a little more than the other, but always to try to get back to that balance is really, really important. I mean, were there other times where I was so in my feminine that I actually lost the masculine. I've done that too. Not to the point where I, had to experience some major, major medical issue to rebalance it. But, I realized that I lost some power in the way that I was maybe leading or directing. And, then realized that I needed to step back into the masculine. So, it's a dance. It's a dance. And, I'm just really grateful that I'm aware of the dance. So that I could always come back to center.
I agree. I think true healing happens when you become very conscious of your daily dance, of a moment dance, because every moment in our life changes, correct? Every moment we have to feel like we're feminine, or we have to feel more masculine, or we have to blend it both. And I think that dance that you do and the conscious that you have about this dance is, to me, is the most amazing thing. But it takes you also to be proactive and taking care of yourself. And in this lifetime, you have a feminine body, and the feminine is what we exude in different ways. But how do you take care of that part of yourself, the part of yourself that says, I am feminine, I am who I am? The masculine is there, I love it, I respect it, but I am feminine. I am the divine feminine, actually. That's the best way to say it, to ask the question, because we all are the divine,
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think the divine feminine can kind of manifest magic. There was one point where our executive team was just having a little bit of trouble. And, I could have addressed it in, a couple of different ways. I could have kind of come in there with an iron fist, and said, okay, you need to go. This is the way we're going to do it. You're either on board or you're not, and that's not the way that I chose to handle it. I chose to bring the team together and really have us all share and honor ourselves in what we were thinking and feeling. And then to come in with, obviously a sincere love for every person on the team, but also some firmness, which is, this is what we need to do next. And I'm inviting you all to be a part of that. And, also that if you don't feel super aligned to that, then I welcome you, to find an alternative that feels good for you. And bringing in the love to something like that is magical. And it actually produces more than you could actually ever expect from a tough conversation like that. And it just so happened that was a huge, huge positive turning point for the team in that moment. And that was just another kind of moment where the divine feminine showed its power and possibility, and that, yeah, magic could happen when you bring that power in.
So do you do and practice this magic for you? This divine feminine magic?
It is. Well, it's so funny you asked that. I have to take myself onto personal retreats a couple times a year, to give myself time and for me to go, okay, where am I? Because I'm still running the company. I mean, I still have a great team. I have an executive director and an artistic director now, so I'm not the one, kind of pulling the strings on a daily basis. But you know, it still feels like a lot of, busy and on the go, a lot less than before, by the way. I've really eased in my daily routine, 100%. But even so, I know that I need to honor myself and take care of myself. And so I take myself onto these retreats. And most recently, I went to Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. And I came back with several promises to myself, one of which was I am turning my office into a half office, half Zen zone. And so I moved all this furniture over to one side of the room, and on that side of the room is a work in progress because I want it to be a space for my practice. I want it to be a space for meditation, a space for yoga. I've just learned how to do self Reiki. I have a lot of spiritual books that I haven't read yet. I have, a mandala book that I want to color. I mean, all of these cathartic self-care practices that I honestly love. Journaling, you name it. I love it. And I have now dedicated a space in my house for that practice and self-care.
That is very powerful because you're blending the work life with your spiritual life. The spiritual life is inside of us, correct? We just hide it, like you said earlier, with blankets or coats or whatever. But once we find it and we can find that balance, the office and the home and then the meditation, the Zen place. And I call it a temple. I always believe in having temples in my houses. Even I brought it all the way from Sedona to Greece, but that's another story. But creating that temple is also you understanding your body, your own body temple, that is the powerful part because your body is everything. Your body is your mind, spirit. And that is powerful to create that temple and that meditation space and the Zen space, as you call it. But would you give that advice to the younger generation that is starting their life now? Yes, in Sedona, we have a lot of young generation that go in there, but that's only pretty much I feel in Sedona and some some other powerful spots. But what would you say for our audience all over the world that would you say now that you're young, start this or another advice that you can give them?
Yes. Well, I do have two stepdaughters
Mm.
who are 17 and 18. And they have a lot to contend with. You know, they have obviously still a culture that is pushing achievement. They have an endless kind of like social media presence and pressure. And it is pretty tough. I think, in this sort of high school container for them to take time for themselves. And so I have always kind of encouraged them to put down their phone. We've gone camping, for example, and the rule was, okay, while we're camping, we're putting our phones in a bucket over here and we're not touching it. And they thought, we're not going to be able to live without that. And I remember after that, um, our eldest basically wrote an essay for school about what it felt like to not have her phone for 5 days. And it was fantastic. And so this was just about being in nature and coming home to yourself and giving time to yourself. So I do think that that is such an important awareness to have starting from a young age. And I've also tried to teach them, the power of inner inquiry because that's also critical, to truly understanding yourself and what you need, what you want, and what you allow in your life. So, yeah, I definitely think that that young women in particular would just greatly benefit from understanding their true feminine power.
I feel like you've shared so much amazing insight and wisdom with us today and really taken us on this spectacular journey. And, following up on Zeffie's question, that's the advice you'd give to young people. What advice do you wish you had received as a young person that would have been really impactful and meaningful for you?
So I would have loved to have known that what we can see and feel is not it. There is so much beyond what we can just see and feel and is tangible, and to explore it, because I feel like there is so much that awareness of our greater being can bring us. And the earlier we discover that, the greater our life will be, the more meaningful it will be, the more connected it will be, and the more purposeful it will be. So I guess my piece of advice would be to look beyond the obvious and listen.
I absolutely love that. And I feel like sometimes we get on that sort of treadmill of life and we're going and we don't always take that time to listen. And I love something you said, like the power of inner inquiry and how taking that time to listen to ourselves, to hear our intuition, to surrender in the deepest possible way, and to allow for life to kind of present itself through that path is extremely inspiring. I am sort of blown away by your story today, Danette, and not just all the things that you have brought into being, but the way in which you did that and the honesty with which you shared today and the ability you had in some of the toughest moments that we face to listen to yourself and to honor yourself and then to expand that journey. And so I can't thank you enough for being able to share that so beautifully with us today. I'd love for people to have an opportunity to connect with you and benefit from all the different things that you're doing. So, what would be the best way for our audience to reach out to you and to connect to you and experience some of the stuff that Illuminate does or other things that you're working on these days?
Well, certainly you could find us at illuminatefilmfestival.com. And we have an email address there on our contact page, and you could reach anybody on the team, or you could write to me and it will be forwarded. But I'm certainly available to share. I love to connect with people on a personal level, and I'm happy to be available. And the great thing about Illuminate is that we're not just an annual festival that takes place right now in Santa Barbara, but we are globally online. So we have about 150 films that are available in any country at any time. You can go to illuminatefilmfestival.com and go to our virtual screening room and choose to be uplifted, enlightened, and inspired.
And I will say, I worked for a beautiful season one time at Illuminate, and the films that they choose really do illuminate and uplift, and the people that they bring together and the energy surrounding that festival is extremely powerful and beautiful. And so, if you do get a chance to ever attend, or if you're a filmmaker and want to submit your film. It's such a great thing to be a part of. So I would recommend it to everybody. Thank you so much for being our guest today. We so appreciate you.
I just want to congratulate you that you are really focusing on your healing and continuing with experience healing and really, taking Reiki and everything that you do because, it's needed. And I'm glad you shared all that. And it was amazing. Of course, Illuminate is the most amazing film place that, in Sedona, and it brings a lot of incredible things, but also the self-healing that you do is very powerful. So thank you, and I honor you for that.
Thank you. And I just want everybody to know I've been fully healthy. All my levels have been 100% normal since that one moment. And yes, but continuing to take care of oneself is like, is in the highest order. So thank you, Zephy, for that. And thank you, Kathy, for this, wonderful time to share with women all over.
Thank you for tuning in to Women Arising, where we celebrate the resilience, wisdom, and power of women on the rise. Remember, when women rise, we all rise. If you're ready to embark on your journey of empowerment, sign up for our mailing list at womenarising.com and join our community of strong, inspiring women. To connect with Zephy Devi and ignite your inner fire, visit zephydevi.com and sign up to get your free tantric meditation. Let Zephy illuminate your path, helping you discover the magic and power that reside within you. To connect with Kathy Hartenstein and claim your spectacularness, visit createmorebliss.com and sign up for a free 30-minute consult call where she can help you break through your emotional blocks to success. Let Kathy be your guide on this journey of self-discovery and empowerment. Thank you for being a part of the Women Arising community. Together, let's continue to uplift, inspire, and empower women everywhere. Until next time, keep rising, keep shining, and keep embracing the divine feminine power that resides within you.
You are the holy grail, the Magdalene. Woman, no need to search any longer.